Bryn Cutter swore he heard his own name in the wind again. That damn voice. Whispers lost in the blizzard, curling through the steel bones of the ruined outpost like something alive. But it wasn't real. Couldn't be. Not after 6 years of isolation. Not after burying every voice that had once called him friend. He adjusted the strap of his salvaged pack, shifting its weight off a bruised shoulder. Snow lashed his face in sheets, fine as powdered glass, tearing at the exposed edge of his hood. The storm wasn't the worst he'd seen, but it was close. On a world like Navarra 7, the weather didn't argue. It devoured. The corridor he followed, if you could still call it that, had once been a mining rail line. Now was a rib cage of rusted girders half sunken in frost, lined with half-eaten crates and bones of machines long since bled dry of power. He was 30 clicks from the central dome, scavenging on instinct, knowing full well there was almost nothing left out here worth the cold. And yet he kept going. Maybe he was hoping for a miracle. Maybe he was just too damn stubborn to lie down and die. His boots crunched over frozen slag and shattered polymer glass. The air reeked faintly of ozone and rust. Somewhere behind him, the brittle wind scraped against hollow steel, mimicking voices he no longer had the strength to answer. He came upon the freight tunnel just as the last of his daylight burned out behind the clouds. What little glow remained from Navarra's dying sun had long since surrendered to a white void. Only the faint pulse of a shoulder lamp kept back the dark. He flicked it to wide beam and stepped into the collapsed tunnel, eyes scanning for anything with salvage value. A crate, partially buried, ice blackened but intact. Bryn crouched, grunting against the stiffness in his knees. The crowbar bit into the seal with a harsh snap. He pried it open, revealing wiring, split insulation, a shattered power relay. Scrap. Less than nothing. He let out a breath that fogged in front of his cracked lips. Not even enough energy left to curse properly. Then sound. Not wind. Not metal. A breath. He froze. Listened. It came again. A weak, broken exhale. Human? No. There was a rhythm to it that was wrong. Too faint. Too smooth. Bryn rose slowly, every nerve awake now. He swept the beam of his light across the snowdrift to his left, and the world narrowed into a single point. There was something there. A body, curled like a child in the lee of the collapsed tunnel wall. Snow dusted the shape like a burial shroud, but patches of skin peeked through. Not human skin. Violet. He moved before he thought, closing the distance in 4 fast strides. She wasn't wearing environmental gear, just a torn tunic, the edges frozen stiff. Her limbs were bare, arms wrapped tightly around her ribs. Her fingers, long, clawless, trembling, were half buried in the snow. Violet skin, luminous veins like silver thread under the surface. The frostbite had already started to bloom on her lips. Her hair spilled across the ice in a tangled mane, white as starlight, wet and streaked with wind-borne grime. Not a trick of the light. Not human. He could see it now. The curve of her ears, slightly elongated, the structure of her jaw too fine, too sharp. Her breathing was shallow, but she was breathing. Bryn dropped to one knee. "Hey," he said. His voice came out hoarse from disuse. "Can you hear me?" She didn't move. He touched her shoulder. She didn't flinch, didn't resist. Her eyes were open, barely. Pale silver irises glowed faintly, catching the beam of his lamp with an eerie, wet shimmer. Not dead. He moved fast, stripped off his flight jacket, insulated, patched with thermo weave, and wrapped it around her as gently as his frostbitten fingers allowed. Her skin felt like stone under his touch, her bones sharp against his palm. She weighed nothing. "Come on," he muttered, lifting her. "You're not dying here." The storm hit harder as he stood, the wind slamming into his side like a hammer. But he didn't stop. Couldn't. He shifted her weight against his chest, locked one arm under her knees, and trudged back toward the outpost ruins. His ship, if the broken hull embedded in Hangar 6 still qualified as one, was less than a kilometer away. Far enough for the cold to matter. Far enough that he doubted they'd both make it back if he stumbled. He didn't stumble. When the airlock hissed open, It was like walking into a tomb with a single candle still burning. The emergency light flickered as he stepped inside. The heater panel read temp, 4.6 degrees Celsius and falling. He carried her past the half-gutted console into the crew cabin, a narrow room with one cot, one overhead strip of light, and walls lined with scavenge tools. He laid her down, working fast to pull a blanket from the storage locker. Only one left. The other had been traded weeks ago. He hesitated, then turned to the console, activated the encrypted compad. It took him 30 seconds to re-establish the black market trade link. Thermal blankets. Unlicensed stock. He scrolled fast. Cost. 240 credits. He had 287. Fuel would have cost him all of it. This meant no power cell top-up. No short hop to Sector A9 for supplies. He stared at the screen for 3 seconds, then pressed confirm purchase. The console beeped. The transfer processed. The last of his credits vanished. 10 minutes later, the drone dropped the package through the delivery hatch, half frozen and steaming from atmospheric burn. He tore it open, unwrapped the thermal blanket, and pressed the warming coil against her chest. She twitched. Her mouth opened slightly. No words, just a wet rasp. "It's okay," he murmured, kneeling beside her. "You're safe. Don't move." He wrapped the blanket tight around her shoulders and tucked her closer to the heater, placing a cloth between her skin and the hot plate. Her breath caught, then released. He watched her eyes flutter shut. She was still shivering, but less violently. Her fingers had relaxed slightly, curled now against the blanket instead of digging into the metal floor. Bryn sat down heavily across from her, leaning his back against the opposite wall. His body ached. His skin burned where the cold had gotten in. He reached into his bag and pulled out a ration bar, unwrapped it, bit off a piece, then placed the rest near her hand, just in case. Outside, the wind shrieked on. Inside, it was quiet. He studied her face, watching as her breathing slowed, then deepened. Her eyelids fluttered, but didn't open again. She looked like someone from a dream, or a memory. What the hell had she been doing out there? No gear, no boots, no ID, just that tattered tunic and those haunted eyes. And not a single word. She wasn't just alien. She was alone. He rubbed his eyes with the back of his palm, fatigue settling in like a blanket of its own. It would have been easy to shut down, to fall asleep right there on the floor. But he kept his eyes on her a little longer. Tomorrow, he'd find out who she was, what she was. Tonight, she didn't die in the snow. And maybe, just maybe neither did he. Bryn woke to the sound of her breath. Shallow, uneven, but present. He opened his eyes slowly, lids stiff from the chill in the air. The small cabin of his wrecked ship hadn't gotten any warmer overnight. The emergency heater still sputtered quietly beside the cot, blinking amber, failing as usual. But it had held enough charge to keep the cold at bay. Just enough. The girl, no, the woman, still lay under the thermal blanket, barely visible beneath its silvered folds. Her long white hair had spilled over the edge of the cot, curling against the floor like frozen silk. Violet's skin, though warmer now, remained tight across the fragile lines of her face. She hadn't moved much since he brought her in. Bryn sat up slowly. His back cracked in protest. The floor had never been comfortable, but it was better than making her share the cot. She wouldn't have survived the night out there, and even inside, the fight wasn't over. Her breathing stuttered again, then steadied. Not quite restful. Not yet. He crossed to the storage unit and retrieved a tin of protein broth concentrate. Cheap, synthetic, and probably older than she was, but hot liquid was hot liquid. He added snow melt from his supply tank, stirred until it thickened into something vaguely edible, and heated it over the thermal plate. The smell was metallic and bland, but it filled the air with something other than silence. Her eyes opened as he returned to her side. Not wide, just a careful, cautious sliver of silver staring up at him. He crouched down beside her. "Can you sit up?" he asked quietly. She didn't respond. He offered the metal cup. She blinked once. Then again. Slowly, she pushed herself upright with stiff, trembling arms. Her shoulders trembled under the blanket, breath hitched in shallow pulls, but she moved like someone who'd fought her way out of worse. Bryn didn't reach for her. He let her do it herself. When she was sitting, he extended the cup again. This time, she took it. Her hands were so cold that he could feel the chill even through the insulated cup's handle. She brought it to her lips, cautiously, as if unsure it was real. Then she drank. A single sip. Her throat worked visibly. Then another. Her hand shook. She drank too fast, coughed, nearly spilled it. Bryn caught the cup before it slipped. She flinched. He froze, hands still. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said, keeping his voice low and steady. "I just don't want you to drop it." She looked at him, not with trust, not yet, but not with the same bone-deep panic as before. He gently let go of the cup, watching as she took another, slower sip. Her lips were still cracked, her skin marked with fine white lines, cold burns, frost scars, and starvation etched into her bones. But her breathing was stronger now, focused. He moved back, giving her space. "Name's Bryn," he said after a beat. Bryn Cutter. Ex-pilot. Not much else. No answer. Just the quiet sipping of broth. He didn't push it. Instead, he moved to the back of the cabin and started rummaging through the emergency pack. His gear was dwindling. Water tablets, backup flares, a heat coil that hadn't worked in 2 years. He'd been trading more and more for food lately. The extra thermal blanket he gave her was supposed to be bartered for fuel. There was no backup plan now. Just this moment. He glanced over his shoulder. She was staring at the empty cup, holding in both hands as if it were something precious. He stepped back to her side. "There's more. If you want it." She hesitated, then nodded. That single motion, it hit him harder than it should have. He didn't know her name, didn't know her species, didn't even know if she'd survive the next 3 days. But the way her fingers clung to that battered cup, like it was the first warmth she'd known in years, that he understood. He made her another. This time, she took it more slowly. As she drank, Bryn moved around the ship, checking the heater's core and the atmospheric seal. He made notes of where the thermal tape had begun to peel near the port hatch. If another storm rolled in, they'd be cutting it close. Again, he paused when he heard a sound behind him. A whisper-soft shuffle. She was trying to stand. "Careful," he said, turning. "You've been out in that cold too long. Your muscles." She stood anyway, wobbly but upright. The blanket slipped from her shoulders, pooling at her ankles. She wore nothing but that tattered tunic. Her legs were mottled with pale bruises and frost scars. Her knees bent with each shaky breath, but she remained on her feet. And her eyes, those silver-lit, too bright eyes, stared at him with a quiet, almost defiant steadiness. Bryn didn't move. She took one step, then another, stumbled, caught herself on the wall. He didn't reach out. Whatever she had been through, she wasn't ready for touch. Not yet. She made it to the window and stopped there, one hand on the rim, looking out through the frost-caked glass. The outside world was still blinding white, storm still clawing at the ship's hull like a living thing. She stared for a long time. Then slowly, almost imperceptibly, she leaned her forehead against the glass. Bryn finally spoke. "You got a name?" No response. He waited. Seconds passed. Then her fingers lifted. Shaky, unsure. She pointed to the condensation on the window. Slowly, she traced 4 letters. R-I-A-N. Bryn tilted his head. "Rian," he echoed softly. She didn't nod, didn't smile, but her hand stilled on the glass, and her shoulders lowered a fraction. Bryn stepped back, giving her distance again. He moved to the heater, checked its readings. Dropping. Damn thing wouldn't last through the night. He looked at Rian, still standing but visibly weakening. She needed rest, warmth, food, and he needed to make a decision. He had one emergency cell left, buried under the floor panel with his spare reactor tool. It could be traded for food, or sold for fuel. Or he crouched down and pried up the hidden panel, staring at the black cartridge nestled there. Every survival instinct told him to save it. Instead, he powered the secondary heating grid. The cabin hummed. Slowly, the temperature rose. Rian turned from the window and stared at him. Just stared. He met her gaze. "I'm not letting you freeze," he said. "Not again." The words hung between them. Not just about temperature. Not really. She lowered herself back to the cot without a sound. pulled the blanket over her knees. And this time, when he sat down across from her, she didn't flinch. She didn't speak. But when he passed her a water pouch, she took it without hesitation. That was enough. Tomorrow, they'd need to scavenge again. Maybe find someone still trading in the west sector. Maybe try to reactivate the comms. But for now, he leaned back against the wall, listening to the heater hum and her breath slow. And for the first time in 6 long, bitter years, Bryn Cutter didn't feel entirely alone. Not anymore. When Bryn opened his eyes, he wasn't sure at first what had pulled him from sleep. The silence, maybe. Or the stillness. The kind of stillness that only existed in 2 places, graveyards and star-forsaken mining stations. For a moment, disoriented in the dim orange light of the heater coil, he thought she'd vanished. That maybe he'd imagined it all. A hallucination born from hunger and too many nights spent listening to the storm whisper his name. But then he saw her, Rian, curled on the cot, her blanket rising and falling in slow, steady rhythm. Her breathing had evened out sometime during the night. Less shallow, more human, or more alive. The realization hit him harder than he expected. He didn't move right away, just watched the delicate line of her jaw, the way the faint heat flushed her violet skin a few shades warmer where the light hit it. Her long white hair had spread across the pillow like frost traced on black glass. Pale, strange, otherworldly. Beautiful, in a way he didn't have language for. He looked away. There was work to do. Quietly, Bryn pushed himself off the floor, wincing as cold shot up his spine. His joints cracked from the awkward angle he'd slept in, back pressed against the wall, knees half bent. The space was never meant for 2. It hadn't even been meant for 1, not really. But you may do. That's what survival was. Making do. He checked the power cell status, 27%. Enough to run the heater for another few hours if he rationed. Not enough to power the comm array, let alone the booster. That meant no signal. No help. Not yet. His stomach growled as he bent to retrieve a ration cube from the sealed storage tin. He tore it open and popped a chunk into his mouth. Dry, chalky, slightly metallic, but edible. He turned at a faint sound behind him, a soft rustle of cloth. Rian had shifted. She was watching him, no longer dazed, no longer half aware. Her silver eyes were fully open now, bright and reflective in the heater glow. Alert, quiet, assessing. He swallowed the dry bite in his mouth and cleared his throat. Morning, he said softly. I think. A moment passed. Then, unexpectedly, her lips parted. Is it? She asked. Her voice was raw, dry, as if the word had torn its way out. But her accent, subtle, smooth, barely different from his own, was unmistakably fluent. She spoke standard. Bryn blinked, surprised more by the fact that she spoke at all than by the question itself. Technically, no, he replied, after a beat. No sun's here, just a lot of white. You get used to not knowing when the day starts. She studied him a moment longer, then sat up slowly, shoulders trembling as she rose. The blanket slipped down her arms, revealing the bruises at her elbows, the faded frost scars trailing her collarbones. She didn't flinch this time when the air kissed her skin, just adjusted the blanket and held it tighter around herself. Bryn moved carefully to the heat plate, pouring meltwater into a steel mug and setting it down to boil. I made something like tea, he said. Don't expect much. Tastes like metal and burnt plastic, but it's warm. He held the mug out toward her. She stared at it, then at him. Then she reached out and took it. Her fingers brushed his in the exchange, still cool, but no longer brittle. She cradled the mug like it meant something, like it had weight beyond function. He sat back on the crate opposite her, arms resting on his knees. They drank in silence for a while. The tea was bitter. He watched her wince faintly at the taste, but continued drinking anyway. Your name, he said, when she set the mug down. Rian, that's what you wrote. She nodded. I'm Bryn Cutter, he offered. Former cargo pilot. Freelancer. Now, resident of nowhere in particular. Rian tilted her head slightly. Why are you here? He looked at her, half smiling. Funny, I was going to ask you the same thing. I asked first, she said. Her tone wasn't mocking, just factual, but it caught him off guard again. The way she spoke, with that soft precision, felt practiced, like she was relearning how to shape thoughts aloud. Bren rubbed his jaw. I crash-landed, he said eventually. 6 years ago. Systems fried in a whiteout. Beacon was dead. Rescues stopped running this far after the war, and nobody trades in this sector unless they're smuggling. Her eyes stayed on him. He hesitated, then added, I stayed because it was simpler. I built what I needed, kept the heaters working, found old supply caches in the tunnels. Figured if I couldn't leave, maybe I'd make peace with being here. Her gaze didn't waver. Did you? Bryn laughed once. Not even close. That earned the faintest flicker at the corner of her mouth. Not quite a smile, but close. He leaned back, resting against the wall. The heater's quiet hum filled the space between them. And you, he asked, why were you out there? No gear, no signal, not even a beacon flare. She went quiet again. Her hands tightened around the mug. Her shoulders curled slightly inward. I was left behind, she said, voice low. During the withdrawal, my name was on the wrong list. No one came back. Bryn's stomach sank. They thought you were dead? No, she said. They knew. They just didn't care. There was no anger in her tone. That made it worse. Bryn sat in that silence for a long moment. Then he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folded thermal patch. Here, he said. It's not much, but if you stick it under the blanket, it'll help hold in the heat. She took it with both hands, careful, almost reverent. Her fingers brushed his again, longer this time. Deliberate. And this time, she didn't let go immediately. He looked at her. She looked back. In those quiet seconds, a shift happened. Not big, not dramatic, just a subtle recalibration of gravity between them. When she pulled away, it was slow, measured. She tucked the patch under the blanket, then settled back on the cot, keeping her eyes on him. Bren leaned forward slightly. If you want, he said, you can rest again. I'll stay up. The scanner's been twitchy. I need to keep an eye on it anyway. Rian didn't move. You're not afraid of me, she said. He blinked. No, he replied. Should I be? You're human, she said, like that explained everything. He met her eyes. So are you. A beat passed. Then, no, she said. I'm not. He didn't argue, just nodded slowly. Well, he said, you're here. You're breathing. That counts for something. She laid back, pulling the blanket to her chin. Her eyes remained open. And this time, when the heater clicked off and the cold crept in through the seams of the ship's hull, she didn't curl away from him. She stayed facing him, eyes steady, unblinking. And when she finally blinked, it was because sleep had claimed her, not fear. Bryn watched her chest rise and fall for a while longer, then leaned back against the wall and let himself breathe. For the first time in years, he wasn't waiting for the silence to swallow him. Someone else was here to break it. The heater's glow still painted the walls with dim orange light when Bryn opened his eyes. He hadn't meant to fall asleep again, not fully. But sometime between counting the cracks in the dome and the rhythm of Rian's breathing softening, he must have drifted. She was sitting upright now, blanket wrapped loosely around her shoulders. Her posture had changed, calmer but not relaxed. Her eyes were fixed on the frosted window, though her gaze seemed far past it. Bryn pushed himself upright, joints stiff, mind slow. You sleep? He asked. She nodded faintly. Enough. There was something in her voice. Not broken, not cold, just stripped down, honest. Bryn rose, rubbed the back of his neck, and crossed to the heater. The tea he'd left in a mug was cold. He poured fresh water, dropped in a cube of concentrate, and set it back on the plate. No words passed between them as it warmed. It felt like something was waiting, sitting between them. Not tension, not quite. A kind of breath held too long. She broke it first. There's a part of me, she said, that thought I'd never speak again. Not because I couldn't, because I didn't think it mattered anymore. He looked at her, not pushed, just listened. I was married, she said. The words settled into the quiet like stones into still water. Velan, she continued. He was everything a diplomat should be. Calm, unafraid of difficult truths. He believed the war could be ended through language. She turned toward him now, her expression unreadable, her voice steady. He boarded a transport to negotiate one of the last ceasefires. He was the only Virulin on a human diplomatic vessel. He never made it back. Bryn's throat tightened. They told me it was sabotage, that the mission was compromised, a joint tragedy. She gave a hollow laugh. No one took responsibility. The records vanished. The witnesses disappeared. And suddenly, being his wife made me a liability. She drew the blanket tighter. They didn't arrest me, didn't exile me officially. They just made sure I had nowhere to go. My name was quietly removed from every registry, reassigned to a dead station, left behind. Silence stretched, deep and full. I didn't die because of them, she said. I survived despite them. But I stopped speaking because I thought no one would ever listen. Bryn didn't speak right away. Then, slowly, he crouched near the heater, poured the now steaming tea into a cup, and held out to her. She accepted it without hesitation this time. I'm listening, he said. Her fingers trembled just slightly as she took a sip. Then she looked up at him. What about you? What were you before all this? Bryn leaned back against the wall. Cargo pilot. Freelancer. Mostly legal work, some not so much. I ran routes between disputed zones. When things started getting bad, I signed a contract to do discreet transports, mostly evac, sometimes delivery of aid. He exhaled slowly. One run went wrong. We were dropping supplies to a civilian cluster near the frost line. Orders changed mid-flight. Told us to redirect to a higher value zone. The people we were supposed to help, virulent refugees, they were left behind. Some died in the snow. Her eyes stayed locked on his. I tried to argue. Didn't matter. My name ended up on the list of those who carried out protocol without deviation. After that, the job stopped coming, and the guilt didn't. So you came here, she said. I came here to fix my ship, he replied. But I stayed because I thought maybe I didn't deserve to leave. He paused. Until I found you. She didn't look away. And now I'm not so sure what I deserve. But I know what I want. She set the cup down carefully. Her hands were steadier now. She rose, walked slowly to the other side of the small cabin, and opened one of the old data drawers. Inside, buried beneath a tangle of cracked casings, was a single hardened data crystal. She brought it to him and held it out. This is everything Velan gave me, she said. Before his final trip. Names, orders, internal memos from both governments. The truth. Bryn stared at it. Why give it to me? Because you're the first person who hasn't tried to take it, she said. And I'm tired of carrying it alone. He took the crystal. It was light in his hand. Too light for what it held. I don't know what to do with it, he admitted. She stepped back, sat again on the cot. You don't have to know. Just don't let it be erased. They sat there a while longer, not needing to fill the silence anymore. The world outside the dome remained harsh, indifferent. But inside, something else had taken root. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But maybe, finally, the beginning of something worth fighting for. And this time, neither of them would face it alone. The storm outside had shifted. Not gone. Navarra 7 never went quiet, but it had thinned to a steady whisper. The sky beyond the dome was a pale, uniform gray, like the world had exhaled but wasn't done grieving. Inside the shelter, Rian stirred from light sleep. Her back cracked as she sat up, muscles stiff from the cold and tension. She didn't speak right away. She didn't need to. Bryn was already awake, crouched by the control panel, rerouting power. A coil of wires looped from the auxiliary feed into the old beacon array. It shouldn't have worked. Not with parts this old. But somehow, under his fingers, it did. I can feel you thinking, she murmured. He didn't turn. Bad habit. Comes from not having anyone else to talk to. Rian swung her legs off the cot and pulled on her boots. They were too big, borrowed from a mining locker he'd salvaged 2 winters ago, but she wore them like she meant to survive. We can't stay here much longer, he said. The heater's on borrowed time. Power's draining faster than I can replace it. She stepped beside him, gazing at the flickering signal indicator. You've been trying to fix that transmitter since before I got here, she said. Yeah, but now I've got a reason to finish the job. Her eyes met his. Calm, clear, no dramatic declarations. Just understanding. They worked in silence for a while. She adjusted the antenna alignment while he fine-tuned the signal pulse. Outside, the wind picked up again, rattling the dome like a beast testing the walls of cage. Outpost West might still have a working booster, Bryn said after a minute. Old tray hub, abandoned before the collapse. If the relay's intact, we can piggyback a call to the upper orbit lanes. And risk being tracked, she said. They're already looking, he replied. But now we have something they want. His gaze drifted to the data crystal on the table. Rian followed it, then looked back at him. You're sure about this? I'm sure about you, he said simply. She didn't reply. Instead, she turned toward the gear pile and began packing. Thermal blanket, spare battery, a few protein cubes, the blade she always kept close. They moved with efficiency, two survivors who'd learned to prepare without talking it through. But as Bryn sealed the last clasp on his bag, he hesitated, then glanced up. You don't flinch anymore, he said. Rian paused. Is that good? It means you trust me. She shouldered her pack. Or I've just run out of options. He smiled. Same difference. They left the shelter before full daylight, if such a thing existed here. The light was thin, diffused through cloud and ice like memory through grief. Their path wound through snowdrifts, broken walkways, and collapsed towers. Ghosts of station built for cooperation and left to rot in silence. No one spoke. There was no need. Midway through the trek, Bryn paused and pointed toward the horizon. A faint structure rose from the snow, like a broken tooth. West Relay, he said, still standing. Rian narrowed her eyes. Not alone. He followed her gaze. Tracks fresh. Not deep, scout tread, maybe one or two people. Light footprints that disappeared behind the ridge. Bryn tensed. Could be scavengers. Could be worse, she murmured. They approached carefully, keeping low. At the edge of the outpost plaza, Bryn ducked behind a rusted fuel tank and scoped the area. Movement, just beyond the relay's base tower. Two figures. Light armor. Black and gray. Not scavengers. He swore under his breath. Corporate sweepers. Small unit. Recon, not strike. Yet, Rian said, they slipped into the maintenance tunnel behind the tower, hearts pounding, steps careful. Inside, it was colder than outside. The relay station still groaned with the wind, but the noise here was deeper. Metal settling, systems failing, a place that knew it was forgotten. They reached the sub-control panel. Bryn crouched, pulled the casing free, and stared at the brittle wiring. I can reroute. Push a burst out. But if they're monitoring for pings, they'll know. Rian nodded. Then make it count. He worked quickly, hand steady. The beacon lit. A single tone echoed through the hall. A synthetic heartbeat sent into space. Outside, boots struck the metal walkway. They were out of time. Back tunnel, Rian said, pointing. Old air duct. Drops behind a ridge. He didn't argue. They ran. Bryn hit the corner first, then froze. Another figure. Different armor. Not recon. Varen. Rian's breath caught. Her steps faltered. He saw her and smiled. So did Bryn. Then he grabbed her hand and ran the other way. They didn't make it far. The tunnel dropped them just beyond the ridge, close enough to see the relay tower silhouetted against the pale sky, but far enough to feel like they'd slipped behind the edge of the world. Wind hissed across the snow, low and steady. Bryn knelt and scanned the horizon. Signal took. It's out there now, he said. If anyone's listening, they'll hear it. Rian stood beside him, still as a statue. Her eyes weren't on the horizon. They were fixed behind them. He followed, she said. Bryn turned and saw him. A lone figure crossing the white. No helmet. No rush. His long coat rippled behind him like a flag. Snow didn't slow him. Neither did time. Kale Varen, the strategist who had orchestrated her erasure. Not in the files. Not in the kill reports. But behind it all, her husband's death, the silence afterward, the tightening noose around every name that remembered. Bryn reached for his weapon, an old pulse pistol, half-charged, maybe good for one shot. Don't, Rian said. Her voice was calm, measured. He wants us scared, standing still. Varen stopped 10 paces from them. You made this more difficult than it needed to be, he called, not shouting. Just speaking as if this were a meeting, not a manhunt. No one invited you, Bryn replied, leveling the pistol. Varen's eyes flicked to him. The pilot, the repairman, the fool who fell in love with a corpse someone forgot to bury. Rian didn't react. Bryn did. His jaw clenched, but he didn't fire. Why now? Rian asked, stepping forward. 6 years. You let me rot. I let you vanish, Varen corrected. You weren't supposed to outlast the system. And Velan, she asked. What was he? Collateral, Varen said. One word. Enough. Bryn moved first, but Rian was faster. She didn't charge. She closed, precise, sudden, silent. Her blade was out before Varen's hand reached his coat. But he wasn't unarmed. A narrow shock baton snapped from his sleeve. He parried, twisted, drove her back with brutal efficiency. Not trained for elegance, trained to end. Bryn fired. The pulse shot missed, but not by much. Varen turned. That was the opening. Rian's second strike cut low, across the thigh. A clean line. Blood followed. He hissed, stumbled back, regained footing. You still don't understand, he said, breath sharp. You don't matter. The truth you carry doesn't matter. They'll bury it again. Then bury me with it, Rian said. She struck again. Blade met baton. Sparks flew. This wasn't a fight between equals. It was a reckoning. Bryn moved to flank. No words, no warning. He came in low, shoulder first, driving Varen off balance. They fell hard, wrestling in the snow. The pistol skidded from his grip. Rian reached it first. She didn't aim at Varen's chest. She aimed at the leg he was favoring. The pulse blast took him down. He screamed, rolled but didn't rise. Bryn staggered to his feet, breath ragged. You want to kill him? Rian stared at the man on the ground. His coat soaked with blood. His eyes wide, not with pain, but fury. No, she said. I want him to live. I want him to watch. She pulled the data crystal from her coat and held it up. This? It's already gone. Uploaded. Distributed. You lost. He tried to rise. She pressed the pistol to his shoulder and fired again. He dropped unconscious. They left him there. By the time they returned to the ridge, the wind had changed. Sharper now, curling with urgency. The transmitter light blinked green. Inbound signal confirmed. Bryn looked at her. They're coming. She nodded. I know. He hesitated. You don't have to go with me. Rian turned to him, her expression unreadable. Neither do you, but I will, he said. That earned the smallest smile. Then we go together. She took his hand, no ceremony. Just truth. Behind them, the snow would bury the blood. The wreckage. The man who once believed silence was stronger than survival. Ahead, for the first time, was something else. A future, and no one would take it from him. The snowstorm had eased, leaving behind a broken silence, like the world had run out of breath. The signal beacon blinked steady green against the frozen skyline, pulsing through the last haze of morning frost. Rian stood at the edge of the outpost's landing platform, wind tugging at her coat, silver eyes fixed on the sky. The old relay tower groaned behind her, bent but still standing, like everything else here. She didn't speak. Not yet. She didn't have to. Bryn stood a few paces away, scanning the horizon through half-frozen goggles. His pulse was steady now, but only because it had to be. He turned to her. 6 minutes, he said. She nodded. They both knew what that meant. The shuttle was inbound, civilian registry, unaffiliated, drawn in by the wide burst call Bryn had triggered from the relay hours ago. The one carrying a copy of the truth Rian had bled for. And one chance to leave this dead place behind. Bryn stepped toward her. You still sure about this? I was sure the moment I gave you the data crystal, she said quietly. I just didn't know what leaving would feel like. And now? She didn't answer right away. Instead, she looked down at her boots, boots still too large, laced with scrap cord, worn from the tunnels. It feels like I might still be alive, she said. Bryn smiled faintly. You are. She looked up, meeting his gaze. And you? What does this mean for you? He hesitated, then shrugged. I don't know. Maybe nothing. Maybe everything. His eyes softened. I came here looking for a reason to leave. Turns out, I found a reason to stay human. The words settled between them, quiet but whole. From the hill behind the platform, the wind shifted again, and with it, the sound of a small engine. The shuttle. Low profile, matte hull, no logos. Civilian, just like they'd hoped. But still, Bryn's hand dropped instinctively to his belt. The pistol was gone. He didn't need it now, but the reflex was hard to break. Rian watched as the ship descended, its landing thrusters kicking up a flurry of ice and wind. When the door opened, a single figure stepped out. Human, mid-40s, short, wiry, wrapped in a parka that had seen better days. She raised one gloved hand. "You cut her." "I am," Brent said. "You put out a wide burst. Got something about war crimes, diplomatic fraud, council obstruction, real light reading." Bren didn't flinch. "We have the original files. They're duplicated and encoded into the wide burst. You don't need us for the story." The woman tilted her head. "No, but I figure I owe the truth to whoever paid the price for it." Her eyes shifted to Rian. "And you are?" Rian stepped forward, the one who didn't stay dead. There was no triumph in her voice, no bitterness, just fact. The pilot studied her for a long beat, then nodded. "We've got med supplies, food, heat. Not much, but better than this." She turned back toward the shuttle. "If you're ready." Rian looked once more at the outpost behind her. Not for nostalgia, for finality. The snow-covered corridor where she'd almost died. The dome where they'd almost frozen. The relay tower that had finally spoken their names back to the stars. She turned away. Bren reached out, his fingers brushing hers. "I'm not asking for a promise," he said. "Just space beside you, wherever this leads." Rian met his hand halfway, laced her fingers through his. "That's all I want," she said. They walked together toward the open ramp. The wind swirled behind them, cold and familiar. But it didn't reach inside. The shuttle took off 20 minutes later. Quiet, unarmed, just another rust bucket moving through dead air. But for the first time in years, Bryn didn't feel like he was drifting, and Rian didn't feel like she was disappearing. They sat side by side in the back cabin, watching frost gather on the edge of the window. The planet below shrank inch by inch. That haunted slab of ice, war, and silence, finally behind them. Ahead, that was the strange part. There was no plan, no mission, nowhere to run from or justice to chase. Just possibility. A soft tone broke the quiet. A message flashing across the shuttle's comm screen. Received. Full archive confirmed. Distributed to 37 nodes. Confirmed playback by independent network. Rian stared at the words for a long moment, then shut her eyes. She hadn't done it for vengeance. She had done it because the lie had taken everything. And the truth? It didn't return what she'd lost. But it gave someone else a chance not to lose the same. Later, Bryn found her leaning against the wall near the rear airlock, staring out at the stars. He stepped beside her, not speaking. She looked over. "It's strange," she said, "to still be afraid of peace." "Peace is harder," Bryn said. "Takes longer to learn." She gave a quiet laugh. "So what do we do now?" He looked at her. "Now we heal," he said. "Now we build something no one gets to erase." She reached for his hand again, gently. Not a rescue, not a debt, just presence. Whatever came next, they'd face it together. And this time, no one would be left behind. The shuttle touched down with barely a sound. A soft hiss of pressure release. The artificial gravity adjusting. Then silence. Rian stepped out first, boots meeting sun-warmed stone. Not ice, not broken steel, just clean, dry ground. Pale blue sky above, filtered through a light dome, but open enough to see real light. Not flicker strips, not frost glow. Bryn followed, blinking against the sunlight. They were in a small arrival district just outside Meridia Prime, one of the core colonies rebuilt after the ceasefire. Glass-paneled towers rose on the edge of the horizon, but here, there were trees. Real ones, low and wind-shaped, swaying in air that didn't smell like rust or survival. It smelled like life. They didn't speak right away. They just breathed. That alone was a kind of freedom. The local medic had checked them quickly, offering supplies and warmth and no questions. No branding scans. No registry chains. Just a quiet nod from a woman who knew the look of people who'd been hunted too long. "You're cleared," she'd said. "No one's following. Not anymore." And that was it. By midday, Rian and Bryn had moved into a temporary flat. Small, clean, sunlit. Nothing like the rusted-out cabins of Navarra 7. It had a working shower, real food, and walls that didn't creak with wind. They spent the day walking. Not with purpose, just walking. Rian's fingers brushed over the bark of a tree as if it were holy. She knelt to touch the soil, laughed, soft, short, but real, when a child's toy drone zipped past her and made her flinch. The child apologized. Rian only smiled. Bryn bought 2 hot teas from a street stall just because it was there. They sat on a bench near a fountain, water, real water, running freely. For hours, neither said much. But the silence was different now. Not survival, not retreat, just space. Shared. When dusk came, they returned to the flat. He opened the door for her, and she stepped inside without hesitation. No tension, no ghosts in the corners, just stillness, and the knowing that for the first time, they weren't looking over their shoulders. That night, it began with stillness. Not the kind of silence that weighed with dread, but something softer, slower, like the world outside had finally run out of reasons to interrupt them. They had returned to the small flat hours earlier. The sun had dipped low behind Meridia's southern rim, casting a warm, amber glow across the windows. Artificial atmosphere hummed steadily in the background, unbroken. Clean. Bren had taken the first real shower in years. When he stepped out, he found Rian on the edge of the bed, unbraiding her long white hair with fingers that moved almost shyly. She wore a simple tunic now, soft and loose. The scar that crossed her collarbone caught the light. He froze in the doorway, not because of her body, but because of her ease, her being there, in a room, in the open, unafraid. She looked up, met his eyes, and smiled. No performance, no invitation, just acknowledgement. I didn't think I'd ever feel clean again, she said softly, running a hand through her hair. But today I do. Brent approached slowly, towel draped around his neck. He sat beside her, close enough to feel the warmth of her body without touching. Funny, he said, I didn't think I'd ever feel human again. Rian reached out, her fingers brushing lightly along his jaw. She traced the stubble, the old scar above his brow. You never stopped being human, she murmured. You just forgot how it felt to be touched like one. He turned to her then, not in hunger, in recognition. Their kiss was slow, the kind that happens not because of need, but because of relief. Because you've waited long enough, and now you don't have to. Her hands slid into his damp hair. His fingers found the curve of her waist, lingering at the hem of her tunic. She pressed into him, small gasps escaping between breaths. Not from fear, never again, but from rediscovery. Rian guided him back, her body easing over his with a grace that came not from seduction, but certainty. Bryn stared up at her. The light behind her turned her violet skin into a painting of dusk. Her long white hair tumbled forward, brushing his shoulders. She looked down at him as if he were the first steady thing she'd found after years of falling. And he let her. He let her lead, because she needed to reclaim something, and he was willing to be the place where that reclamation began. Her hips moved slowly, searching for rhythm, not fast, not rushed, like she wanted to feel everything. Like every shift, every breath, every shared inch of skin was a word in a language they were building together. Bryn's hands gripped her thighs, anchoring himself in the gravity of her. She arched back, a low sound slipping from her throat, half surprise, half pleasure. The kind of sound made when something finally, fully fits, not just physically, but entirely. She leaned down again, forehead pressed to his, her breath warm against his mouth. I've never, she whispered. He kissed the edge of her jaw. Me neither. Her laugh, breathy, unsure, dissolved into a moan as he shifted beneath her, his mouth grazing the soft slope of her neck, his hands reverent, not claiming, but cherishing. There was no performance between them, only permission. She moved with increasing rhythm now, bolder, more assured. Each motion echoing the trust that had taken weeks to form, battles to forge. Bryn held her close as she came undone above him, breath trembling, body shivering not from cold but release. Years of holding herself rigid finally melting into something warm, open, real. He followed her, slower, deeper, his arms wrapped tight around her back. When he whispered her name, it was not in lust, but gratitude. They stayed that way, tangled, skin to skin, the world narrowing to the soft sounds of recovery. Later, when the air had cooled and the room had dimmed, Rian curled into his chest, fingers trailing lazy circles along his arm. I didn't think I'd ever want to be seen again, she said. He brushed her hair from her cheek. Then I'm honored to be the one who does. She smiled into his skin. I don't want this to be survival anymore. It's not, he said. It's home. They fell asleep with limbs entwined and no walls between them. Not between their bodies. Not between their hearts. Whatever came next, they would meet it like this. Whole. Chosen. Awake. Together.